Morning. Welcome back to Morning at NTV. My name is Malaki Bilodera. Remember, we are on the hashtag Morning at NTV. That's on Twitter. You can also stream us live NTV Uganda on Facebook and on YouTube pages. And of course, this is the Kickstarter segment. And today we are joined by a lawyer just to make sense of the happenings that have been, taking place in the country, especially after the Arua by-election campaigns turned chaotic. And of course, we saw the arrest of some of the MPs together with some civilians. And so today we're just trying to make sense. Yesterday we saw Bobi Wine and the others, being warranted the bail they wanted. And of course now that is the discussion today. And in studios I'm joined by Counsel Jude Biamukama. Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, you're welcome to the show. Now, in the dailies today, the big story, and of course I'll sample the two, is Bobi Wine co-accused narrate torture deal. And on the New Vision, we have Bobi Wine, 32 others get bail. Now, of course, we'll start with what the Speaker of Parliament yesterday, we saw her coming out to actually write a letter to the President demanding for the arrest of, police officials that were involved in this particular torture, because yesterday when we saw these MPs being brought to the Gulu High Court, most of them could hardly walk by themselves. So what do you make of this?
I think it's unfortunate that we should get to this level just because of a parliamentary by-election. We shouldn't be here in the first place. And we are here because I think there is a growing climate of intolerance within our political environment, which we need to, as a country, we need to sit down and agree on what the rules should be. We are a country that professes to be governed by the rule of law. But I think we are allowing lawlessness to take over, especially lawlessness from the security organs. And it's very unfortunate that we should get to that level at this point in time. We have got a constitution which governs us. We all have different rights. All the political actors, whether they are in government, whether they are in the ruling party, or in the opposition, when it comes to matters of law, we are also governed by the same law, and we all have the same rights.
Right.
And but what we seem to see is that I think we are getting a situation where some people increasingly are above the law and are allowed to get away with so much, while the rest of the population, even the rights they have under the law, they are not allowed to enjoy or to benefit from them. Because, I mean, when you see what really happened here, of course, there are all those other allegations about the throwing of a stone to a presidential convoy.
Right.
Although, of course, still legally we shall be asking ourselves whether that stone was thrown by 33 people. But that's a discussion that we can always leave for the court to determine that.
Okay.
By the way, the whole affair played out, even if that has taken place, by the way, I do not think that it should have been handled in that manner, that you get people, detain them incommunicado, nobody knows where they are, and the next thing they are showing up, one is showing up before the military court, and the others are showing up before a court of law, 300 kilometers away, and with clearly signs of torture. It's very unfortunate.
Let me ask you, because maybe the government would stand and say that this 33 actually, when they were brought to book, most of them who were charged with treason, including Bobi Wine, Honorable Chagulanyi, were actually charged with treason. And so would they be warranted to have tortured these detainees, so to speak?
There are two things regarding torture. First of all, torture in itself is a bad idea.
Okay.
Like the president himself, he wrote to the security agencies, I think must be last year, and he was explaining, although of course I thought it was a very mild letter, because ideally I would expect that the head of state would say torture is against the law, it's against the constitution, it's against every known international convention.
Right.
Okay? But the president simply wrote a very brief and simple letter addressed to the security organs, explaining to them, one, why torture does not work, and at the time he was mostly addressing people being tortured so they could confess to crimes they have not committed. There's that sort of torture, of beating up suspects, subjecting them to all sorts of brutal treatment as a way to get them to confess to certain crimes, which in some cases some will say even in many cases, they have not committed, but you force people to admit to actions they have not done. Then there is torture simply because you are punishing people, because you are not happy with them.
So in this time round, actually this time round, we would say that they were tortured as a form of punishment.
That is what I can make out of it.
Okay.
That what you have here is people are being beaten up because, well, they are accused of having blocked the president's convoy, and bad enough they are members of, you know, political opposition from various, a number from, I think, the Forum for Democratic Change, and others were supporting an independent candidate leaning to the, again, to the FDC.
Right.
So it looks like they're being beaten up because they belong to the political opposition. We have had violence in some political campaigns between the candidates of the ruling party, all of them. We had a situation like that, I think, even in the last, in Guampara, in the last elections.
Right.
Before, where the Honorable Chama did, before, when he was still in an leaning independent. We had a very, very broad election. But they were all candidates from almost the same political leaning. Even in the primaries of the ruling party, there has been violence, but we have never seen security organs reacting
to this,
to the extent which they have done over the Arua incident.
Let's get to the details of the bail that was granted yesterday to Honorable Chagulanyi together with the 32 others. And for Chagulanyi, we clearly saw that he was tortured, because for him to actually get transport from Gulu to his home, it's an ambulance that took him. So would you say that he actually stands a strong case with regards to us having evidence that he's clearly been tortured and many others? What are his chances of, you know, finally being a free man permanently?
I think, of course, it's again, what we have at the moment is from the courts of law, we have been receiving mixed signals. First of all, what is happening to Honorable Chagulanyi, he's really not the first person to be tortured. For those who may be familiar with the events in this country less than 10 years ago, we had again a group of people who used to be referred to as the PRA suspects, people who were alleged to belong to a rebel group called the People's Redemption Army. Yes. Who were also beaten, tortured. They would be given bail by one court, then they are arrested from the court premises, and that saga went on for over 3-4 years until eventually some of them applied for amnesty, and then the others stayed until eventually they were released. And eventually the Constitutional Court, they petitioned the Constitutional Court regarding their mistreatment, and the Constitutional Court judges agreed that they had been mistreated to such an extent that they could never ever receive a fair trial over their alleged offences, and so the court declared their intended trial a nullity, null and void, and said, well, because their rights have been violated in the course of trying them, it was not necessary. They could not have a fair trial. And I think it was a very good position, but subsequently I see it has not been applied all the time. It has only been applied once. I recall again we had this other unfortunate incidents of the Kayunga riots. Right. Again, a number of people were arrested and charged with terrorism, and eventually the charges against them were dismissed by the High Court, again on grounds that they had, a number of their rights had been violated prior to their trial, and therefore the trial was rendered.
So what are the strong points for the lawyers of Chagulanyi to actually take advantage of, for them to just stand a strong case against government so we can see Bobi Wine maybe potentially get free again? What are their argument cases, the top 3?
I think what I see, of course, one, the key issue here is the charge itself does look to be problematic, the manner in which the charge sheet is framed, and the charge of treason that they are faced with. Yes. But well, it's still early in the day, because you know, the state can always amend a charge at one point or another. So we'll have to wait and see. But in its current form, it's difficult actually for the state to even demonstrate the charge of treason against these people.
Why do you say so?
You know, the charge of treason is committed by, there are various acts that can amount to treason. The obvious one is trying to take up arms to overthrow the government. Clearly that's not what we have here, according to the charge sheet. Then there is also, I think, the act which they are being accused of, which comes close, would be when, for instance, you threaten to harm the president, the person of the president,
Yes.
again, that can amount to treason. And that's where the focus seems to be. But now, when you have that, and then you have 33 people, it's a bit of a stretch to say you have 33 people who have either conspired together simply for one of them to throw a stone. So but it's a charge which, in my view, is more of a knee-jerk reaction, really, to what took place. I do not think, if you are asking me, I think I could safely bet that I don't think those charges will last long.
Okay.
My suspicion is at some point even the state may lose interest
in the story.
In the story, because it's going to be interesting from the point of view of Uganda Law Society, of which I'm a member.
Right.
I think it would be interesting, not that I'm speaking on their behalf, but we would have loved to know the identity of the people who are going to come as witnesses, because quite a number of people are interested in knowing, so who are these people who were at the scene, who actually arrested these people? Yes. Because we think those people also have several cases to answer for torturing these suspects.
We also saw Mr. Kassiano Wadri being, granted bail yesterday. Yeah. But there were conditions to that. He has been barred from, going to his, constituency, Arua municipality. What do you make of this?
Of course, it's a fairly odd condition.
Okay.
But I gather that his own lawyers in the court, it seems were not objecting to that particular condition. And maybe that's what could have influenced the judge to also maintain it. Because, in a bail application, there are two things. The major purpose of bail is to allow a suspect to have some liberty, right, as their charge is tried before the court. That's the key purpose of bail. But again, the court has a duty to ensure that one of this person who is granted bail does not go and and commit the same offense, or does not interfere with investigations. And I think the state raised that because they seem to claim that perhaps Honorable Kassiano Wadri is going to interfere with investigations. Although, again, it's a bit of a stretch, if you ask me, because if the charge is that a stone or stones were thrown at the presidential convoy and the members of the president's security detail already have that evidence, right, there obviously shouldn't be much to go and investigate in Arua. That would be my assumption. But, well, we'll leave it at that and say, because the judge didn't set that condition out of the blue, it was proposed and not opposed, and he let it be. But I think the overall objective, my suspicion, is to simply calm down tempers. We know this was a very charged environment. Right. And much as he won the election, when you look at the tallies, there were around 2-3 other very strong candidates. And it may not be a good idea to start having victory parties and other. At this point, yes, it's a very charged environment, right, and I think maybe that's what could have influenced that peculiar condition. We also saw a particular international lawyer who came through to the country with a bid to just try and support Honorable Chagulanyi, but apparently he was stopped by government and he was declared a persona non grata. Yes, persona non grata. What do you make of that? With regards to the law, what does the law say? It's of course it's also another violation, because our constitution guarantees people a right to legal representation. And while someone is going to argue that, well, that right is restricted to lawyers who are based within Uganda, I do not think it's the case, especially when you have cases of this magnitude, where really you need because you see why we are coming to this, a situation where people, especially I think these people whom we can categorize as political opponents, yes, of the ruling party, we are operating in an environment in which it seems there is a need for external support. I have noticed Mr. Robert Amsterdam, for instance, I think significantly tried to raise the plight of Honorable Chagulanyi in the international community, right? Which I think was a fair thing to do. Of course, there are very many people who are upset by that, and so many allegations are flying left, right, and center. But Mr. Robert Amsterdam's law firm specializes actually in representing people who are in such human rights situations and trying to publicize their case to the global community. That's what he does. His law firm does a bit of political advocacy. And I think that has been his major contribution. He wrote a very persuasive piece I read in The Guardian, one of those publications based in the United Kingdom,
Right.
where he was making a number of points about what he thinks is happening in Uganda with regard to mistreatment of his client. So one, it is not correct, of course, for the government to not want people to determine who can represent them or give them legal support. It's not proper, and it violates our law, even our own constitution, because people have a right to legal representation. And when situations like Arua have happened and you have people being tortured, that right becomes more necessary, because it may be that to hold some of those people accountable, you're not going to do so in Uganda. You may need to do so in international tribunals. And therefore, you necessarily need lawyers who are not necessarily based in Uganda.
So, in that regard, how far do you think this case will go?
Well, issues of torture, at this level, of course, there are the allegations which we have. Although our courts are, of course, our courts are able to handle them. And I think they would be able to handle them if they were presented. But why there is an international dimension is that what we are seeing now is that it's not yet clear whether the government is interested in bringing the perpetrators to book. And when that happens, then it becomes necessary for people to seek the intervention of international tribunals. We have got the African Court on People and Human Rights, for instance. I don't think this is the sort of case maybe which can reach the ICC. People like to mention the ICC when these sorts of incidents happen. Personally, I wouldn't think that what we have now is a case that would probably reach the ICC. But I think we have got the East African Court of Justice. Those courts, by the way, may not make very particular orders ordering the government of Uganda to do this or that, but usually they make declarations. But their declarations are very important because they're able to show that, well, here you have a country called Uganda. It has signed itself to, it's a signatory to a number of conventions. They claim they have respect for human rights and for the rule of law. And we are making a declaration that, in fact, they do not.
Yes.
So that helps to put also the reputation of our country in its proper perspective. And but again, like I indicated, we shouldn't have to get to that. It should be very easy at the moment, like the Speaker is asking the President. They should simply unveil the identities of the people who carried out the arrests of these people.
And charge them. Yes.
If those people operated within the law as they are claiming, that can be tested by the courts. Let the courts determine that. Do
you think that will happen? Of course, we have seen the IGP and his team, two are arrested. And of course, you also had the UPDF spokesperson saying that they will investigate into the matter. But do you think we'll actually get to that point where we see these people being paraded, being charged of apparently torturing these members of parliament and civilians? I'm
very, very skeptical. I do not see that happening, because even when we have had a situation before, in 2011, we had that police officer, Bwana Gilbert Alineitwe. He came close, I mean, before the live cameras at Murago roundabout. He brutalized Dr. Besigye before the cameras. He was never ever tried in any court for what he did. And in fact, people said, no, what he did was, it's like standard operating procedure. But don't you think,
but don't you think this time round now that this story has actually attracted the interest of many, not just in Uganda, but globally, that things will be done differently?
I don't think it's going to be done differently, because already, for instance, by now, we should have had the identities of the people who carried out the arrests.
Right.
They should have been available to the public to know that, yes, these people were arrested in this manner by so and so. And as far as we are concerned, if these people think they were not arrested in a lawful manner, they should go to the courts of law and take these people to court. But you see, they are concealing their identities because they also know that what has happened is extremely grave. And what I think is going to happen is, it's going to become, they're going to politicize this issue. They're going to start saying, well, you know, the only people who are claiming they were tortured, they are opposition. Therefore, let's turn this into a government versus opposition issue, so that we can discourage the neutrals, we can discourage civil society, we can discourage other people who may want to hold these people to book from joining in. That's what I think, that's where we are heading. They're just trying to politicize the issue, even though torture, brutal treatment of suspects is really something that should concern all of us, whether we are in the ruling party or not. It's because it's something which happens to anybody at any time.
Let's talk about Uganda Law Society, and you're actually a member of it. Yesterday, Uganda Law Society came out to condemn the arrest of supporters of Honorable Chagulani, together with other people who were just arrested, and police actually came out to say that they do not know of their whereabouts. What do you make of this? Why are we having these supporters also being arrested, you know, and now the police is saying we have nothing to do with it, we don't know where they are. Why are we getting to this point?
You know, what is happening is, I think that the police is very keen to demonstrate that it's ready to operate within the law. But the sister security agencies are not going to give us that assurance, although we have had the army commander promise the same,
Right.
The CDF General Muhoozi. But what is that? First of all, other security agencies are not supposed to be arresting civilians. Okay, that is purely the work of the police. But it has again become a standard operating procedure that you have ISO, you have got CMI, all of them carrying out arrests, and we now have an SFC carrying out arrests. And what happens is they get people, detain them in places we don't know, and after mistreating them, some of them end up dumped at police cells. I think first of all, the police needs to be very clear and tell these sister security agencies that if you choose to arrest people, don't ever bring them back to our cells. Arrest them and handle them from there, so we know who is responsible. Because I can understand part of the difficulties which the police is in.
Right.
Because it's a matter of fact that some of these people are arrested by their sister security agencies, who are not allowed to arrest, who do not even have gazetted places of detention.
So at the end of the day, it's unlawful for
It's
sister
very,
agencies.
it's very unlawful. And as we can see what is happening, it's taking on a political tone. That's why I indicated to you earlier that I think there is lawlessness in the manner in which the security organs in this country behave, and it's very unfortunate. The head of state needs to rein them in.
And what's your plan moving forward as the Uganda Law Society, now that you've come out, you know, to condemn these particular arrests? What is your plan moving forward, just to help them that have been, you know, arrested and police doesn't know where they are?
Of course, I can only speak as a member. Like I said, we have a leadership, which obviously will give our official position. So I cannot give that. But what I know is we did pass a resolution. We want to challenge some of these actions before the courts of law. And I'm sure that's going to be done officially by the Uganda Law Society, but hopefully also by many private individuals who are able to notice that what's going on is, you know, is something which requires action even from the neutrals, from civil society. Otherwise, if we allow security organs to maintain this level of lawlessness, this disregard for due process, they don't respect the rights of suspects, they don't respect the rights of people who are in opposition, people who want to go and exercise their democratic right.
Let me ask you a question. We have the 33, actually, a big number of them that are still released on bail. Most of them cannot afford legal representation. What does the future hold for them?
I think it's also another issue which the Uganda Law Society is addressing.
Okay.
A number of them are going to receive legal assistance through the channels of Uganda Law Society. Although, of course, treason, an offense of treason, by the way, is a capital offense.
Right.
And under our law and our constitution, any person charged with a capital offense has the right to legal representation at the expense of the state. And that usually happens, is that they get allocated lawyers. But this is, of course, a unique matter where everyone wants to really have someone who is going to dedicate time and attention to their defense.
Right.
So I think there's quite a good number of our members who are out there who want to help out. You saw quite a number of them in the court yesterday, and I'm sure they're going to be in, because this is not an ordinary private matter, you know.
Yes.
This is a criminal. It should have been an ordinary criminal trial, but it's not one, because you have suspects who are being mistreated. You have the government coming out to deny that, no, these people are not being mistreated. When all the neutrals and our naked eyes can tell that, no, these people actually have been brutalized and have been treated in a manner that's not lawful.
Right.
So, because that's an environment, because, you know, the law society, which at times people tend to claim that, you know, the law society is being partisan and things like that. But you see, the law society has a mandate, by the way, under an act of parliament, to promote the rule of law. And it's part of this why our leadership is always keen to speak out when these events happen. And also because we have a duty to the general public. And that's a duty which there are also certain visits to discharge.
Okay, moving forward now that you're from the legal front, what are we likely to see in the days to come with regards to this particular case from a legal standpoint?
Like I have already indicated, I think this is a case that is dead on arrival. I just see it being maintained. At some point, you know, it may become a nuisance. You have people who have to travel to Gulu maybe once every month. I think for now they are supposed to go back on Thursday. So there's a way, you know, it kind of tries to, one, it wastes people's time and, you know, and resources, which they should be dedicating perhaps to other worthy causes, but instead they have to spend their time reporting to court once a month. You know, it's something that shouldn't be happening. Because at the end of the day, I'm not very sure that government is very interested in prosecuting this matter to its logical conclusion.
So you think the government will let go of this?
I think they will at some point.
Okay.
Or they will abandon it to take its natural course, like usually happens. Because we have had so many charged situations where people are charged and then 3-4 years later, everybody has lost interest.
Right.
And that's what I think we are likely to see.
Okay.
On the other hand, I actually would encourage the government to be honorable enough and drop these charges, and because this is a matter that has given our country very bad press. I don't think that bad press benefits government at all. A lot of mistakes have been made, and the correct thing to do would be to say, well, mistakes have been made, there is no need to push this further.
Let's move on.
Yeah, that's what I think would be the right approach.
Okay. Because
yes, people are charged with treason, but this is, by the way, even if the stone throwing took place, I don't know that it took place in actual fact. There are
investigations.
It remains an allegation.
Yes.
But again, you know, we have to recognize that this was in the middle of a by-election. It was not that it's an ordinary presidential convoy passing by, and then some brazen fellow out of the blue throws a stone. No.
Okay.
You know, it was in a very heated and charged environment.
All right.
And you know, once tempers have calmed down, people should be able to move on. It was just a by-election.
Okay, thank you so much, sir, for joining us
Thank
in the
you.
studios. Thank you so much for shedding light in this particular environment and actually situation that we are experiencing in the country. We're taking a short commercial break. Do not go away. Up next, On the Ground.